All right, today we are going to talk a little bit about some laws and civil rights. I'm going to say that South Dakota does not have a lot of laws about serving our ELLs. However, there have been a lot of civil rights cases that at a higher level kind of set in stone what needs to be happening. So even though we may not have it written out in our state laws, it's definitely in our federal. So we are going to be talking about the guidelines to follow. All right, make myself a little smaller. There we go. So first of all, a home language survey. You have to have a home language survey. If you go to a district and they say they have never had one of these or they have never given it to everyone in their district, that's where you have to start. It's a lot of work that first time, but you have to be kind of non-biased and you have to send it out to everyone, even if you know English is their only language, so that you're not discriminating and saying, well, they have darker skin or they don't speak very well, so they could speak another language at home. You have to first send it out to everyone. After that has been done, then you only send out this home language survey, or they only take it when they come with a new student to register. So you have a new second grader, and again, it does not matter what this kid looks like or their parents. It's given to everyone. So the Department of Education requires schools to have a procedure for identifying and testing ELs. And this is from the Office of Civil Rights. Some survey questions that your survey might have on is what language is most frequently spoken at home? Which language did your child learn when he or she first began to speak? What language does your child most frequently speak at home? And is there another language other than English spoken in your home? If so, which language? So some people ask, well, should I give them an option of like Spanish, this? And I would say no, leave that wide open, because some parents otherwise will think that English is supposed to be the correct answer and they put that, whereas they seem to be a little bit more honest if it's kind of open-ended like that. Then they just sign at the bottom. What they're signing is just that they've given accurate information. However, if they put English, and you hear one of the little boys and little girls talking in Spanish, you can write on that form, the kids were talking back and forth in Spanish, initial it with your initials, and put the date on it. That way, if the Office of Civil Rights came and did an audit at your school and they said, why are you serving this student in ELL when they answered all English? You would say you have that documented, that you saw them speaking another language, and then they were obviously screened, qualified, and were put in a program. A lot of times, I would suggest not presenting it to parents as an option. Your kid could go into ELL. I kind of say it is our job to make sure that your student is getting equal education to everyone else. And so here's what we are going to do to provide that support to them. Especially in some cultures, it's very negative to have a student be in something else. They're seen as not as smart, or it's a stigma. So I really don't present this as, do you want your kid in ELL? I present it like it's our job to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all of our students. Here's what we are going to do to meet the needs of your kiddos. And then I talked about this, if your school hasn't done this yet, they have to send it out to everyone in the district, and then they just give this survey to the new kids. So when you get this presentation. These are hyperlinks so that you can go to the site and look at them. So South Dakota approved screeners, when somebody puts a different language on there, then we go through the process of screening. And you really think about this as a broad picture. If you know that mom and dad speak English and that's what they put on their form, but they work a lot of times at night, and Sally is spending a ton of time with grandma who primarily speaks Spanish, take that into consideration. That would be another thing that you write on that form, and then you can screen her to see how her English is. So you could use the WIDA screener. That's only grades 1 through 12. And since we use the WIDA, it gives ELP scores of 1 through 6, which is great. The kindergarten model is one that you have to pay for. So it's $160 to $180 typically, but you get the full color textbooks, the manipulatives, and the format is very similar to the Access, the WIDA Access. So you get your scores based on, again, that 1 through 6 level in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. The WAPT is free, but it is not recommended just because it says like the kids, I don't know if I've never used the WAPT, but I know that it doesn't give ELP levels. It kind of says like low, medium, and high, and it doesn't really flush that out of what it means if you're low, medium, or high. So it's not very informative to us as ELL teachers, to the classroom teachers, or the parents with how the kids are really doing. So I know people would say really just push to get the kindergarten model test, which would be probably the best. But all of those are approved by South Dakota as screeners. So there are 6 levels of English language proficiency. So a level 1, entering, emerging, developing, expanding, bridging, all the way to reaching. And then there are 5 grade level clusters in which you would screen. Now this is a little complicated, so hang tight with me. So the pre-K to 1 semester for first graders. The thought is, if a student is in their first semester of that class, so Sally is a first grader and it's the very first, it's the very first quarter, very first semester. I'm not going to give her the first and second grade screener. I'm going to give her the kindergarten screener because I would argue that she has not had access for long enough to first grade material in order that she should know that. So just be careful, especially when you get to like the grades 9 through 12. I would never want a 9th grader in their first semester to take the screener for grades 9 through 12 because they have not had access to that grade level material yet. So just kind of think for which one you're going to give them. Have they had access long enough? Have they been here for more than a quarter? Or actually, this says more than a semester, so half a year. Have they been here that long in order that I should give them that grade level? If not, you need to jump back to the previous grade level screener. So South Dakota identification. So for that very first one, the WAPT is for first semester. So again, that does not correlate with WIDA. So if they get a 29 or lower, then they qualify for ELL. And then that next one, there's a few different stipulations that you need to go through if you're testing K through 1 with the WAPT. If you're using the WIDA online screener, it correlates perfectly with what we use for WIDA access. And so basically, if they get a composite or a combined score of 5.0 or lower, they qualify. They need to be above a 5.0 to exit our program. So if their composite score was lower than that, they automatically qualify. Now, sometimes a student can be strong in a couple of areas, but if that overall score is not a 5.0, they still qualify. And this is not a bad thing. They might qualify, get a little bit of extra language support, and they might exit our program in a year or 2 years. But it's important that we go by the composite scores and all those cutoffs. And then the same is true with the kindergarten model. It again goes with that 1 through 6 ELP level. So if it's a composite lower than a 5, they qualify. Okay, I said this before. Our South Dakota exit criteria is a composite score of a 5.0. We will go over a little bit more of the breakdown. They need certain scores in reading and writing. And if they don't meet those, then they still don't pass. But they need to have that composite score of ELP level 5 in order for them to exit. And then they would just go into the classroom with their mainstream peers. So parent notification. I remember this is one thing that kind of stressed me out as an ELL teacher because you really have to move fast. So we're going to talk about the notifications for their English language proficiency results and program placement. You have 30 days from the start of the school year for previously identified students. So if I have the 60 students that I worked with last year, I need to, in 30 days from when school started, my WIDA access results came, I don't know, they usually come in May or June. So at the beginning of the school year, I have all of those. I need to send those out to parents. What I did is I would highlight in reading, writing, listening, and speaking where they had to be. Nope, I'm going to say that again. I would highlight where they needed to be in reading and writing because those have cutoff scores. And then I would highlight at that 5 level where they needed the composite score because the breakdown of your sheet will show, and I'll try to find one of these examples to put in here. The breakdown will show, here's how they did this level 1 through 6, reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And here at the bottom is their composite score. So I always highlighted where they had to be. So, and then I would explain that at parent-teacher conferences always too. And so parents kind of got to understand our system, but we'd highlight where they need to be. So when the parents got that sheet, even if they didn't speak great English themselves, they could visually see, okay, the bar is here, the highlight is here. They're really close in reading, but maybe they missed it a little ways in writing yet. Writing is somewhere they're quite a bit behind. Or they at least know what the expectation is for exiting and how close their student was to meeting that expectation. So 30 days, you have to get that sent off. When those reports came to us, I'm thinking they should be digital very soon. When they came to us, they were always hard copy. And so we ran several copies and did those highlights. I kept one for myself. I put one in their cumulative file. You'll hear it called a cum a lot of time. Put one in their cumulative file. I gave one to the classroom teacher as a visual for them to see where that student was. And then I sent that other one home. So that's what I did with my 4 copies. Then you have, once the school year starts and you get a new kiddo, you have 2 weeks to both screen them and get those results to parents. So when you get a new kiddo and on that registration form, it says that they speak another language other than English, you have to be on the ball with screening them right away so that you can get those results. And the results for that, it's not something you wait for. You'll know right away. But get those results sent out to the parents and let them know how you'll be serving their students. So you might say, I'm going to do sheltered instruction with Josue for 30 minutes every day from this time to this time. Sometimes if a kid is coming in, you might already have something in their cumulative file that shows that they are coming from North Dakota, where they were screened and qualified, and here's how they're doing. If you have that, you do not need to rescreen them. They are already considered an ELL student. However, a lot of times those files wouldn't come for like a week or two. After that week time was up, I would be screening. You can't just bank on that coming. Or sometimes I would call ahead to the school. If I knew where they were coming from, I would just call that school and ask, is this student an ELL student? I see on their registration form, they marked that they speak Spanish at home. And then they could tell me. And if that's the case and they told me where they were, then I don't need to rescreen them. They're already in the program. So when you let parents know, you need to just let them know how the student did on their screener, or kids who are already here identified as ELLs, how did they do on that WIDA access test? And then how are we going to be serving them this year to meet their language needs? And be really careful with how you do this. If the kid is ELL, then oftentimes the parents' English is not very strong themselves. And so really be mindful of the language that you send at home. And if it's way over their heads and it's a lot of big terms, then it's not really going to be something useful for them. And we really want it to be. We want them to really feel like they understand what we're doing with their students and just see that we are trying to meet the needs of their kids by doing these various things. Civil rights. The 14th Amendment said no state shall deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Now, as this got hashed out a little bit more over the years, equal protection refers to the following: fair treatment, non-discrimination, and equal opportunity. So I feel like our ELLs, a huge one is that equal opportunity. Are our ELL students having an equal opportunity as their English-speaking peers to quality education? So the Bilingual Education Act of 1968, that was the first law that said having that English proficiency barrier means that they're not getting equal access. If they don't know as much English and they're sitting in a classroom where all the instruction is in English, they're not getting the same learning access as their English-speaking peers. So schools have to do something to help them learn English so that they can have the equal right to education, just like their English-speaking peers. Lau versus Nichols in 1974, this was a big one. When you go into a school, a lot of times you'll hear about a Lau plan or an EL or ELL handbook. They're the same things, but you need one. So if you go to a school and you ask about their Lau plan or ask if they have an ELL handbook, by civil rights, they have to have one if they have ELL kiddos. And even if they don't have ELL kiddos, it'd be good to have one for precautionary measures. What are you going to do when an ELL kiddo comes to your school? So schools just kind of have to have those procedures and plans in place, specifying when we get an ELL kid, here's how we will serve those students. And then remember that some of those kind of laws are apply to everyone. They have to have that notification of how the students did on their WIDA access within 30 days, no matter what. So it doesn't matter what school district you're in, their LAU plan has to align with that. They can't make up something different and say it's part of their ELL handbook. The Castaneda versus Pickard was just that English language proficiency cannot be used, oh, I have a typo, as an indicator of a student's ability. So you cannot say that you're holding a student back because they don't know English well enough. It cannot sometimes we look at language and we associate it with ability, and it's not the same. So I think about when I took Spanish, I knew the very basic words, colors, what various nouns were. So if I was asked a higher order thinking question in Spanish, it's not that I'm struggling to understand or I can't comprehend or give answers for higher order questions. It's that I do not have the language to even give a higher order thinking answer when I get a question in a language that I'm not familiar with. So there's sort of a 3-prong program evaluation. This is, we'll talk about different programs that you can have. And within those programs, they have to be based on theory. I can't say that, well, I'm serving the kids, so it's kind of like the Schneider plan. That's not research-based. You have to be doing a plan that is research-based. And then are the practices, resources, and personnel reasonably calculated to implement the program effectively? So if you think of other programs such as special education, maybe there is a reading intervention program. SPED students don't go with a teacher twice a week for 10 minutes and have positive results. So if you said, I'm seeing Sally twice a week for 10 minutes at a time, that would never fly, because there's no way you could say that that is meeting her needs, even if she is a higher student. If you're not meeting them at least 3 times a week, there's research that says that is not doing anything for them. You may as well leave them in the classroom. So make sure you are thinking about how you're serving those kids, and is it looking similar to what another intervention program would look like based on time and resources. And then, do program results show that language barriers are actually being overcome? If you use the same type of program and you're 3 years in and you're seeing next to no growth on their WIDA access, they're not growing in their English language, the program you're using is not effective, you have to stop using it and you have to find a different program to try with your students. This is something you always have to monitor. If your students at large are not making progress, just like in the classroom, something needs to change. You have to change what you're doing. And then exited students, monitor for 2 years to assure meaningful participation. That means that even after they exit ELL, so they get that 5.0 on their WIDA access composition, or their composite score, overall score, they exit our ELL program, we still have to monitor them for 2 years. Excuse me. And it can't be just you going to the classroom teacher at the end of the year and kind of saying, how did they do this year? You need to have a systematic plan in place for how every ELL teacher in your district or your building is going to monitor their program. Monitor their progress. So even when kids leave ELL, we still need to think about how we're going to watch to make sure they're successful. And that is all that I'm going to cover. There are tons of cases and civil rights things that deal with these, but I would say what we talked about today are kind of the main ones that you should know.